Hey everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive.
Yeah.
One of the things we get asked about a lot
Mm-hmm.
is how to really get fluent in English.
Right.
Like not just study it,
Mm.
not just pass a test,
Yeah.
but actually be able to, use the language.
Uh-huh.
So today we're going to do a deep dive into a really interesting blog post we found
Okay.
that tackles this question head on.
Yeah, sounds good.
This is from a Japanese blogger who goes by the name T9IRD.
Okay.
And he's got this really thought-provoking post
Mm-hmm.
titled, in Japanese, Higa Emir Shansnaith,
Okay.
which roughly translates to
Right.
install the English OS.
I like it.
Yeah, it's really eye-catching, right?
It is.
And he kind of draws on some ideas from this book,
Mm.
Shanar Shie,
Oh.
which is a book about, the best ways for kids to learn English.
Right, right.
And so this whole concept kind of aligns with what some people call developing an English brain.
So it's not just about learning the language, but almost like shifting how you think.
Right, exactly. And
Interesting.
it's not about like translating everything back and forth between English and your native language.
Oh, okay.
It's really about creating these like direct connections
Mm-hmm.
between English words and the actual concepts or images they represent.
Oh, I see.
Like think about it.
Okay.
When you hear the word apple,
Mm-hmm.
you instantly picture that, like round red fruit.
Right.
You don't have to like translate it first in your head.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think a lot of our listeners, they may have spent years memorizing grammar rules,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
vocabulary lists,
Absolutely.
but they still find it hard to, understand a fast-talking native speaker
Yeah. That's a common problem.
or express their thoughts smoothly in English.
It is.
And that's really that gap, right,
Mhm.
between knowing about English and actually using it.
It's like the difference between reading about swimming and actually jumping in the pool.
Yeah, exactly.
You can know all the theory, but until you're in the water, it's different.
So T9 Milady,
Yeah.
he starts off by saying, there's this problem with the knowledge-first approach,
I see.
right? And a lot of us adults,
Uh-huh.
we get really focused on like
Right.
mastering every grammar rule,
Yeah.
building these huge vocabularies,
Yeah.
and like dissecting every sentence.
Right. Gotta get all the details.
Yeah, and we often do this using resources in our native language.
That makes sense. It's comfortable
Right.
to stick with what.
It feels safe, right?
Yeah.
But he makes this really cool analogy.
Oh, okay. What's that?
He says it's like trying to learn snowboarding from a textbook
Uh-huh.
without ever actually like
Yeah.
strapping on a board and hitting the slopes.
Right. Or learning to cook by just reading recipes.
Exactly.
You gotta get in the kitchen.
Right, you got to actually do it. Or like, studying boxing techniques endlessly,
Mm-hmm.
but never getting into the ring
Right. Never actually sparring.
for some actual sparring.
Yeah, it's all theory.
Right.
At that point.
So he's saying, these
Mhm.
practical skills,
Uh-huh.
this like doing of English,
Mm-hmm.
it really only develops through immersion
Right.
and actual application,
Makes sense.
not just through theoretical understanding.
Yeah.
And he has this really great,
Uh-huh.
almost frustrated realization
Okay.
where he says in Japanese,
Yeah.
it's basically him saying,
Uh,
enough with the knowledge. I don't want to be someone who can explain it. I want to be someone who can do it in English,
I love that.
right? It's so relatable.
It's like you might be able to explain,
Mm-hmm.
all the nuances of different verb tenses,
Mm-hmm.
but if you stumble when you actually try to use them,
In a conversation,
exactly.
that theoretical knowledge isn't really serving its purpose.
It's not helpful in that moment.
Right.
You need that practical ability.
So this brings us to his main idea,
Okay.
which is this English OS concept.
Right. The English OS.
Can you kind of break down what he means by that?
Sure. So he uses this analogy of like an operating system,
Mm.
like on a computer.
Right.
And he's saying that you can have this separate English OS running in your brain
Okay.
alongside your native Japanese OS.
I see.
So it's not about replacing your native language.
No.
It's about having this other system that can handle English directly.
Okay. So how does that work, like in practice?
Well, he uses this example of the words
Yeah.
wingo and apple.
Okay.
They both refer to the same thing.
Right. The fruit?
Exactly.
Right.
But he's saying they're not truly equivalent in our minds
Uh-huh.
if we're constantly having to translate between them.
I see.
So the goal is that when you hear apple, you immediately think of the fruit
Right.
without having to go through that step of thinking, that's
Got it.
It's about building a more direct connection.
And that's the whole point of this English OS.
Exactly.
To bypass that translation step.
And make listening, reading, and speaking more effortless.
Right. But he does say that as adults,
Yeah.
we tend to want that immediate understanding.
We like things to make sense.
Right. And it's hard to resist that urge to translate,
It is.
to make it familiar.
Feels safer.
He even says in Japanese,
Okay.
the goal is there's dio,
So what's that mean?
which means like processing English while keeping the part of your brain
Yeah.
that's active during Japanese use
Right.
kind of asleep.
Like creating a separate space for English.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So how do we actually cultivate this English OS?
That's the big question, right?
Right. Like, what are the practical steps?
Mm.
He gives some really good suggestions.
Okay. What are some of them?
Well, first of all, he says,
Yeah.
don't worry about understanding every single word.
Oh, that's good.
Right. It's okay if some things kind of go over your head.
Especially at the beginning.
Right.
It can be overwhelming.
He also says,
Yeah.
it's important to engage with content that's mostly understandable,
Okay.
relatively easy for your level,
Makes sense.
right? Because if you're constantly struggling
Yeah.
with stuff that's way too difficult,
Mm-hmm.
your brain's going to like default back to trying to translate
It's
everything.
going to get overloaded.
So what are some examples?
Okay, so for beginners, maybe things like graded readers
Mm-hmm.
or like simplified news articles.
Those are good.
And for people who are a bit more advanced,
Yeah.
maybe podcasts or YouTube channels
Right.
that are designed for English learners.
Okay.
Where they speak a little bit slower and explain things more.
And he also suggests using visual aids as much as possible,
Oh, that's a good one.
right? Like pictures, diagrams, even gestures,
Yeah.
because those things help you understand
Right.
without relying on your native language.
It's more direct.
Right.
Interesting.
And he even recommends,
Yeah.
considering using English dictionaries.
Oh, that's a good tip.
Right.
Hadn't thought of that.
Because it forces you to think about the word in English.
Right. It keeps you within that English OS.
Exactly.
Smart.
And then he really emphasizes
Yeah.
the importance of letting go of this need for perfect understanding
Oh, I like that.
right away.
Yeah.
He says it's okay
Mm-hmm.
if you only grasp 80%
Mm-hmm.
or even just 10%.
At first, as long as you're enjoying it.
As long as you're enjoying the content.
Because that enjoyment is what keeps you going.
Right.
It's the motivation.
It's the fuel.
Exactly.
And he has this really nice analogy.
Oh, tell me about it.
He compares it to
Okay.
enjoying music.
Uh-huh.
Even if you're listening through like imperfect speakers or appreciating a beautiful view.
Yeah.
Even if you're looking through
Mhm.
slightly cloudy glasses,
Okay.
the imperfections shouldn't stop you
Right.
from engaging with the
The
experience.
experience is what matters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then to really illustrate this English OS idea,
Okay.
he uses this image
Yeah.
of a plant growing.
Oh, interesting.
Can you walk us through that metaphor?
Sure. So he breaks down the growth of this English OS
Yeah.
into 6 key elements
Okay.
that are all parts of a plant.
Great.
So first we have the Tayo, which is the sun.
Okay, it's on.
And this represents your motivation, your ideals, your goals
Right.
for learning English.
That makes sense.
It's the driving force,
Right.
the energy behind it all.
Okay, what's next?
Then we have Mizu, which is water.
Water.
And this symbolizes comprehensible input,
Right.
all that understandable English content you're exposed to.
Okay, so that's like the nourishment
Exactly.
for the plant to grow.
It is what allows the OS to develop. What about the soil?
Yes, the Tucci.
Okay.
This represents the surrounding environment.
Okay.
So that includes other learners you interact with,
Mm-hmm.
beliefs about learning,
I see.
the kind of overall atmosphere where you're learning.
Okay, so that's the context.
Right. It's the ground where the English OS is taking root.
Makes sense.
Then we have the roots.
Okay, so
Right.
what do those represent?
So the roots are your accumulated experiences,
Okay.
past achievements,
Uh-huh.
and your confidence.
So that's like the foundation.
Exactly.
Oh.
It's what your English ability is built on.
And then the leaves.
Yes.
What about those?
These represent the practical applications of your English skills.
Oh, okay.
So things like ordering food,
Mm-hmm.
understanding movies,
Right.
writing emails.
The different ways you're actually using the language.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's like the visible outcome
Right. It's what people see.
of all the growth that's happening.
And finally, we have the trunk.
Okay. This symbolizes your contextual inference skills
Okay.
and your grammatical intuition.
So like being able to
Yeah.
understand meaning from context.
And develop a natural feel for what sounds right
Yes.
without having to consciously think about the rules all the time.
That's a really cool way to look at it.
It is.
It shows how language acquisition is.
Yeah.
Not just about memorizing.
It's not just about the books.
Right. It's a whole process.
It's more organic.
And he says, you know, we should focus on nurturing these different elements.
Right. Giving the plant what it needs to thrive.
Providing that comprehensible input,
The water,
maintaining our enthusiasm.
the sunshine,
Right.
and fostering a supportive learning environment.
The soil.
Yeah.
Rather than constantly trying to force understanding through translation.
Right. Letting the plant grow naturally.
Which brings us to this really crucial point
Okay.
about resisting the urge to translate.
Uh-huh. Yeah, he's very adamant about this.
He is, he
Yeah.
says, in Japanese work. Jimajo. OU. Jilo. Saron. Si. In Japanese, which basically translates to,
Okay.
you want to know the Japanese meaning, and translating makes you feel secure, endure it. Leave it alone.
Wow. So he's saying, like, even though it's tempting
Yeah.
to look up every word and translate everything,
Mm.
we should actually try to resist that urge.
He says it actually hinders
Yeah,
the development of truly independent English understanding.
I can see that.
But it can be frustrating for learners, though, right?
Yeah.
To constantly encounter words they don't know. Like, how do you deal with that feeling of being lost?
That's a good point.
But I think his point is that you don't need to understand everything to make progress,
Oh, okay.
right? Like, if you're focusing on the overall meaning
Mm-hmm.
and enjoying the content,
Uh-huh.
your brain will naturally start picking up patterns and vocabulary
Okay.
without you having to consciously translate everything.
It's like absorbing it through osmosis. Interesting.
He says that relying on translation
Yeah.
creates this kind of weak link.
Where English is always being supported by your native language.
Exactly.
It can't stand on its own.
It's like it's always leaning on that crutch.
Yeah. And that makes it less reliable
Right.
in real-time situations.
When you don't have time to translate.
You need that instant access.
He contrasts this with the idea of English words,
Yeah.
forming direct connections with each other
Creating their own network.
in your mind, right?
Yeah.
And this makes language processing so much faster
Right.
and more natural.
Because you're not always going through that middleman.
And he sums it up really well by saying,
What does he say?
"Zoti,"
Which means?
which means
Okay.
strongly endure the feeling of wanting to reach out from Japanese and wait for the English words to start connecting on their own.
I love that.
Right. It's about letting that organic growth of the English OS happen.
Yeah. Just got to trust the process.
And he also talks about his own personal experiences
Oh, okay.
and some things he's observed
Yeah.
from watching his young child learn language.
That's interesting.
Right. He says by 2021,
Huh.
he was able to comfortably enjoy content
Okay.
like the Joe Rogan Experience,
Oh, wow.
the Philip DeFranco show,
Rare.
on being
Those are all pretty advanced.
right. And he says
Mhm.
he might not catch every single word,
Right.
but he can follow the general flow.
And enjoy the content.
Exactly. And he says a big part of this
Okay.
came from watching his 6-year-old child.
Learn language naturally.
Right. And he points out this difference
Okay.
between how adults learn
Yeah.
and how kids learn.
It is different.
Adults want to understand immediately.
Right. We want to translate everything.
You want to translate everything.
Make it fit into our existing framework.
Whereas kids are just kind of immersed.
Just soaking it all up
And they gradually grasp meaning
through experience.
through experience.
It's interesting.
He describes it as, so Drew, when for OAE, sure. What's an E?
What's that mean?
Which is like
Okay.
being immersed in a sea of foreign language,
I like that image.
and then like slowly
yeah.
vague images start to form
Mm-hmm.
and meaning becomes clear.
So it's not this like sudden flash of understanding.
Right.
It's more gradual.
It's more like a dawning awareness.
That actually aligns with research in implicit learning.
Oh, how so?
Our brains can absorb patterns and knowledge
Mhm.
without us even realizing it.
Interesting.
It's like how a child learns their first language.
Right.
By focusing on comprehensible input.
Yeah.
We're basically setting up the conditions for this to happen in English, too.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And he concludes this whole section with a really powerful statement.
Okay, let's hear it.
He says, "Shonaway." Saki says, "Jabade hor with you the lot way, found Xing. You saw them which call. San you'd see, Dash is a good win of his some chin. Hon si Xing, Saki some lo chin. 这次创立成为龙庆先人性mellow the his lane yeah shen plays就是上我这胡志bel你上我的 someone down that at John Sanoa some associations you someone is so immortal voice. Wow, that's a mouthful.
It is.
What does it mean?
It means English supported by Japanese is weak. You must not try to grab English from Japanese. Endure ambiguity, discomfort, and not understanding, enjoy it. And wait for English to support itself and grow independently.
So it's like letting go of that need to control everything.
Right.
And just trusting the process.
And he even refers to his child as his teacher in this.
Oh, wow.
Right?
That's humbling.
It's a real shift in perspective.
It is.
For a lot of adult learners.
Yeah, we're so used to
Right.
wanting to understand everything right away.
We want the answers.
But sometimes the not knowing is where the real learning happens.
So to summarize,
Yeah.
Tinamity's main point is that
We should focus on building this direct, intuitive understanding of English.
by immersing ourselves in the language.
When allowing this separate English OS to develop over time,
Yeah.
it's about prioritizing that comprehensible input,
Right.
accepting that you won't understand everything immediately.
And resisting that urge to translate.
So we've talked about why this is important,
Mm-hmm.
but how do we actually start doing this?
Right. That's the next step.
In our own learning journeys?
Yeah.
Here's something to think about.
Okay, I'm listening.
How might this English OS concept
Mm-hmm.
apply beyond just language learning?
Oh, that's interesting.
Right.
I like that.
Like in other areas of skill development
Okay.
or knowledge acquisition.
Uh-huh.
Is there value in embracing that direct engagement
Right.
and allowing understanding to emerge organically
Instead of forcing it.
instead of forcing it?
Interesting.
So I'd encourage you to reflect on your own learning processes
Yeah.
and see how you might cultivate
Mm.
this more direct, intuitive approach
In other areas of life.
in different aspects of your life.
That's a great takeaway.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
It's been a pleasure as always.
We'll see you next time.
See ya.